On several occasions, the WWE has tried to find successors to wrestlers you probably already know, such as The Undertaker or The Rock. Alberto Del Rio has been one of its biggest projects since 2010, with great success but also scandals that have tarnished his reputation. It's a pleasure to meet you on the Wrestling Paradise to tell you the craziest stories about the Mexican. Are you ready to be shocked when you learn why he was fired by the company when an employee was racist towards him? Do you want to understand how he could have been accused of kidnapping and sexual assault by his ex-fiancée? Do you want to find out what he revealed about the wrestler PAIGE, his former girlfriend? And are you curious to learn about the beautiful gesture that John Cena did for him in 2015? You have come to the right place, because in our video we will look at the Mexican's very unique journey, and it might surprise you. You are on the Wrestling Paradise, the craziest stories about Alberto Del Rio. Here we go. Before coming to the WWE, Alberto Del Rio wasn't just anybody, far from it. You should know that he is the nephew of the Mexican wrestling legend Mil Mascaras and the son of Dos Caras, a former world heavyweight champion at the Universal Wrestling Association. So he has sports entertainment in his blood, with a father and an uncle who were also bodybuilders. Quite naturally, he therefore started his career in his country after having trained in amateur wrestling. Originally, he wore a mask, as it is the tradition in lucha libre. Under the name Dos Caras Jr., he will become famous at the Consejo Mundial de Lucha Libre, where he will be world heavyweight champion for 2 years. He will also say of himself that he was the Randy Orton of Mexico, while the luchador Místico, who will become Sin Cara in the WWE in 2011, was the equivalent of John Cena. While he could have been content to be a recognized wrestler in his country, he had more ambition. Thus, in 2009, he will discuss with the WWE, the biggest wrestling company in the world. He represented a good deal for the American company. He had talent, he had a good physique since he is 6'5", and above all, he already knows English very well. That is not necessarily the case for all wrestlers who did not start in the United States. Alberto refuses a first offer from the Stamford Federation that is not important enough, and then ends up signing there in June 2009. In reality, a Mexican company was simply offering him more money than the American one, so he waited for them to do a better offer. In America, he will not start directly on television, but rather at Florida Championship Wrestling, which serves as the Federation's training center at the time. He has to learn the wrestling style of the promotion there, which is completely different from lucha libre. It should be noted that he will wrestle there without a mask, and that he hated this long period of preparation. However, that was where the foundations of his new character were laid. Nowadays, many people think of Alberto Del Rio and immediately associate him with several controversies that we are going to talk about. But it must be remembered that before all this, he had incredible and historical successes which are worth highlighting. In 2011, he won the Royal Rumble, the Money in the Bank briefcase, and the WWE title. By becoming Mr. Money in the Bank, he became the first wrestler from a minority to accomplish this feat, while he was against Rey Mysterio and The Miz, among others. So in just a few months, he won 2 major events. This performance is completely unheard of. No wrestler had managed this before him. Seeing this, we think that Vince McMahon and the other officials rarely gave so much to the same wrestler who was still new in the company. For the record, he wasn't able to cash in his briefcase during the famous confrontation between John Cena and CM Punk, also at the Money in the Bank show in 2011. You may remember it, we were in the middle of the summer of Punk, when the kid from Chicago did his famous pipe bomb and threatened to leave the Federation with the main title. It will be different at SummerSlam, a few weeks later. While CM Punk was facing John Cena for the undisputed WWE title and Kevin Nash was coming to destroy Punk, Alberto sees the opportunity. This time, he can cash in his briefcase to the end, successfully. Barely a year after his debut in the main roster, the Mexican is the new champion. He is the new face of the biggest wrestling company in the world. This choice was even more relevant since millions of Spanish-speaking fans follow the shows. He is the first man born in Mexico to win the WWE belt, which can make his compatriots proud and which further underlines his incredible success. Looking back at Alberto Del Rio's career, we can wonder what ended his big push, if there was something that broke his popularity with the company's officials. You should know that he was injured in 2011. On his return in 2012, Alberto Del Rio will go in pursuit of the World Heavyweight Championship. What will follow is quite mind-blowing, even more so with the standpoint of a current viewer who is generally volatile and impatient. His rivalry against Sheamus for the heavyweight title will last until September. That is to say, 4 months of rivalry. This resulted in matches between the two men at Over the Limit with Randy Orton and Chris Jericho also in the match that day, Money in the Bank, SummerSlam, and finally Night of Champions. It should be noted that he was supposed to have a match at WrestleMania 28, in this case by being in John Laurinaitis' team against Teddy Long's, but that he was not 100% fit. It was better not to risk getting injured again for several months at the showcase of the Immortals. There was also another project of a match between Randy Orton and him at this show. Subsequently, after these physical glitches and these cancelled plans, we noticed that the Mexican was starting to lose more and more, which may lead to some questions. While he seemed on top of the world in 2011 and enjoying a maximum support from management, we can wonder if this is still the case. One would think that his injury at the end of 2011, as well as a concussion that he had in June 2012 after hitting his head against the big WWE logo on the stage, disappointed Vince McMahon, the boss at that time. We must be aware that an important criteria to become a top superstar is reliability. They must be able to rely on the wrestler all the time. He must be mentally and physically strong. He must not get injured. He must not be suspended for taking illegal products. All that in an intense lifestyle where you have to wrestle almost every night, make media appearances. Everything suggests that from the moment Alberto started being more vulnerable, Vince McMahon gave him less and less. During the summer of 2013, Alberto Del Rio had a funny story with Sin Cara, this luchador who was presented as the next big star in 2011, but who had not lived up to the huge expectations around him at all. They had a match on Monday Night Raw, and on that day, Sin Cara had quickly taken a kick from his opponent in the fingers, which injured him. After a dive outside the ring, he had his finger twisted and asked the referee to stop the match. Alberto will not accept this and will allow himself to continue assaulting him despite the end of the confrontation, obviously annoyed by this attitude of Sin Cara, especially since it was not a very serious injury compared to others. What didn't help was that Alberto Del Rio didn't like his colleague for real. Several years before, when they were both wrestling in Mexico, Sin Cara apparently had a huge problem with his success, allowing himself to arrive late for his matches, spending his time partying and drinking. On the day when they were supposed to have a match against each other, the masked wrestler arrived 3 hours late. Alberto was very upset and went to reprimand his colleague. It didn't please a friend of Sin Cara, who pulled out a gun. Fortunately, they will calm down, and according to Alberto, his colleague apologized to him afterwards. After this match, in which he had therefore hit him for real, Alberto asked him where his heart and his passion were. Sin Cara replied that he no longer wanted to be in the WWE. A few weeks later, we won't see him again. Alberto Del Rio's first WWE adventure will end in the summer of 2014, about 4 years after his debut. He will participate in a battle royale for the Intercontinental title at Battleground on July 20th, 2014, but without success. This match will remain his last appearance on pay-per-view since he will be fired by the company a few days later. The reason he got fired is pretty amazing. He had a backstage fight. While he was on top of the world 3 years before, the man who seemed to be the new star for years to come therefore left without any glory. We could learn that in reality the company's social media manager at the time did a racist joke when they were in catering, which Alberto didn't like. When he asked him to apologize, the guy didn't do it and laughed. So he slapped him, which unfortunately cost him his job. Fortunately, the story of the Mexican in the American Federation does not end there. To everyone's surprise, he will return there, at the Hell in a Cell show in October 2015, a little more than a year later. He will be presented by Zeb Colter, who had however been his enemy on the screen a few years before. He will answer John Cena's open challenge for the United States title. Alberto will manage to win it in less than 10 minutes without any controversy. We can say that this is a real smashing comeback since he wins a rather important title, beating Cena in just a few minutes in a completely clean way. The latter is also at the origin of this victory of the Mexican. Del Rio revealed that John Cena told Vince McMahon that the Federation owed him that after the incident with the social media manager, a gesture for which Alberto will have a lot of gratitude. A few weeks after his big return, we will see Alberto Del Rio in the League of Nations. We are not talking about the European soccer competition, but about a faction in which there was also Sheamus, Rusev and Wade Barrett. Finally, he will lose the United States title that he had won from Cena against Kalisto, against whom he will have a rivalry with also Sin Cara. He will be entitled to a tag team match at WrestleMania 32 with the League of Nations against the New Day. They will manage to beat them before being shriveled by none other than Shawn Michaels, Mick Foley and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Imagine that just a few minutes before this match, Del Rio and his colleagues had a real altercation with the New Day backstage at the event. Definitely, this 2016 edition of the Showcase of the Immortals was memorable for the Mexican. In the summer of 2016, Alberto's journey in the WWE will end again. While he was no longer being given anything interesting on the screen, he was first suspended for a month by the company for not respecting its wellness policy. Then in September, he was fired for the second time. It is a departure that the Mexican will not accept easily. He will blame the Federation for not keeping the promises that were made to him. Apparently, he was supposed to have a much more important role from his return. But from the summer of 2017, he will be involved in some rather sordid stories. Indeed, the former WWE wrestler PAIGE, with whom Alberto had a romantic relationship, accused him of domestic violence, which she apparently suffered every day. Del Rio will defend himself by saying that she was the one who was actually assaulting him and who has been arrested 3 times for domestic violence. He would later confide that if he revealed everything he knew about PAIGE, her career would be completely buried, that she was the one who got arrested for domestic battery in San Antonio, Las Vegas, and Orlando. Unfortunately for him, Alberto's decline did not stop with these stories with PAIGE. Del Rio is going to be arrested for allegations of kidnapping and sexual assault on his girlfriend at that time. To be even more precise, he was accused of having tied his girlfriend's hands, having put a sock in her mouth, having sexually assaulted her for several hours, but also of having destroyed her phone and her computer, and of having tried to burn her passport to prevent her from fleeing. Alberto will say that he can be blamed for being unfaithful, but that he is certainly not a rapist. He says all this was orchestrated by his ex-fiancée to take revenge and smear his image. By the way, the woman will apologize to him and his family publicly for the mistakes she made. According to the Mexican, she confessed to the authorities that she wanted to make him suffer because he had cheated on her 10 days before their wedding in their own bed. His trial will be postponed several times because of the global health context, and at the end of 2021, the charges against him will be dropped. This information deserves to be known because many wrestling fans have tended to condemn him without knowing all the elements. There are always several versions of the same story. We imagine that these scandals have impacted Alberto's life, knowing that the mother of his children unfortunately died in 2022. And that was it for the craziest stories about Alberto Del Rio. Seeing his entire career, which is rich in successes but also in controversies, we think that it is a real shame the Mexican had injuries and a too impulsive temperament, which seemed to have caused his decline. His case also shows that it is not easy to build new stars in wrestling. People must be almost invincible mentally and physically for many years. With Del Rio, there was clearly a real project that was a success for about 3 years, and we can only regret that it didn't last longer, because the Federation really needed stars in its shows between 2011 and 2013. This makes me offer you a debate in your eyes. Are there other wrestlers on whom the Federation should have bet everything at that time? Some who deserve more and others less maybe? We invite you to come and give your opinion. It will be interesting to talk about it together in the comments and to share our points of view. We can say that Alberto Del Rio had a crazy journey in wrestling. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay on the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?